The screaming started before the ferry even left the harbor. Passengers thought it was children playing on the deck of the Herald of Free Enterprise as it prepared to depart Zeebrugge, Belgium. On the evening of March 6, 1987, it was cold. Wind cut through coats and scarves as crew members hurried through final checks. Cars were packed tightly into the vehicle deck below, engines off, drivers waiting in dim fluorescent light. At 6:05 p.m., the ferry pulled away from the dock. No one noticed the bow doors were still open. Water began entering the lower deck immediately. At first it looked like mist blowing in from the sea. Then it became a rushing sheet of black water surging across the floor. Drivers jumped back into their cars, slamming doors as freezing seawater slammed into tires and surged toward windshields. Within seconds, the ferry began to list. On the upper passenger deck, cups slid across tables. Chairs scraped. A woman laughed nervously as the floor tilted beneath her feet. Then the ship lurched violently to port. Lights flickered. People fell. A crew member shouted something over the intercom, the words swallowed by metallic grinding and the roar of water flooding the hull. Below deck, headlights blinked on in panic as seawater rose to dashboard level. Horns blared. Someone pounded on a locked exit door. Another man tried smashing a window with a tire iron, his blows swallowed by the rising tide. 90 seconds after leaving port, the ferry rolled onto its side. Passengers were thrown against walls, ceilings, and one another. Furniture, glass, and bodies slid together in a crushing wave. Then the lights went out. Darkness swallowed everything. Inside the tilted hull, survivors found themselves trapped in sideways corridors that had become vertical shafts. Water poured through stairwells and shattered windows. In the vehicle deck, an air pocket formed near the ceiling, now a wall where several drivers clawed their way upward, gasping for breath in freezing darkness. Some reported hearing voices echoing through the metal interior. Not shouting, whispering. A man later told investigators he could hear someone calmly repeating, "Stay where you are." But no crew members had reached that section of the ship. Outside, rescuers raced toward the capsized ferry lying half-submerged in icy water. Inside the hull, survivors banged on the steel walls, hoping someone could hear them through the freezing sea. And from somewhere deep within the overturned ship came a sound rescuers would later describe as unforgettable. Slow, deliberate, knocking. Rescuers reached the capsized ferry within minutes, their floodlights turning the black water into a blinding silver sheet. The Herald of Free Enterprise lay on its side like a wounded animal, half-submerged, metal groaning as waves struck the exposed hull. From inside, the knocking continued. 3 hits. Pause. 3 more. Crewmen climbed across the slick steel surface, boots slipping in freezing spray. One rescuer dropped to his knees and pressed his ear against the hull. There are people alive in there. Cutting teams arrived and began torching through the metal skin. Sparks hissed into the seawater as oxygen burned through steel. Each strike echoed inside the overturned ship like thunder. Below the surface, trapped passengers heard the cutting. Some began screaming. Others prayed. Inside a narrow air pocket in the vehicle deck, a small group huddled in darkness. The freezing water had risen to their chests. Diesel fumes burned their throats. Every breath tasted like oil and salt. One survivor later said the worst part wasn't the cold. It was the silence between the knocks. Because in those gaps, they could hear movement in the water. Not waves. Not debris. Something shifting slowly through the flooded deck. A man floating beside an overturned van suddenly began shouting that someone had touched his leg. Others told him to stay calm, to conserve energy. Then the knocking stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. Above them, rescuers finally cut a hole large enough to pull survivors through. One by one, hypothermic passengers were lifted into the freezing night air, wrapped in blankets and rushed to waiting ambulances. Some were conscious. Some were not. Many never made a sound. Hours passed as teams searched the submerged interior. Divers navigated upside-down corridors filled with tangled wires, shattered glass, and drifting luggage. Visibility was nearly zero. They moved by touch alone. One diver later described entering a cabin where several victims remained strapped into seats. As he turned to leave, his tank struck the wall. The impact echoed through the compartment. A second knock answered from somewhere deeper in the ship. He froze, listening through the regulator hiss. Nothing followed. When the ferry was finally cleared, 193 people were confirmed dead. Survivors would recount the freezing water, the darkness, and the desperate climb toward air. But several rescuers and passengers reported something they could never fully explain. Long after the last survivor had been pulled from the hull, long after divers confirmed no one remained alive inside, knocking sounds were still heard echoing through the steel, slow, measured, as if someone trapped in the darkness was still signaling for help. Thanks for watching Whisper of Dark. If this story sent chills down your spine, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We explore the darkest mysteries, unsolved crimes, and terrifying tales every week.